Alright, so a new ban list has been announced for Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, so we're going to be talking about today what they've actually hit, what they haven't, what it's going to mean after they hit it in terms of usage and such, and what maybe they've missed or should have done with the list differently. So we're going to take it one card at a time, and to no one's surprise, Cyberstein finds himself at number 1 on this list. So Cyberstein, of course, the 39th most popular monster in the game. This card is absolutely disgusting in sprites in particular, being able to easily revive it, although it's not exclusive to sprites in terms of its usage. There's also FTK strategies that operate around it. It also sees play in a few other decks to varying degrees, but primarily speaking, it's a huge problem in tier elements. So it's another little way of giving tier elements a little bit of a little slap in the wrist without directly interfering with the engine itself. So Cyberstein absolutely had to go, bringing this card back in line with the TCG. Definitely the right move. TCG also, I should mention, just banned this card as well. This card was limited to 1 in the TCG too. Now it is banned in both Master Duel and the TCG, only now being legal in the OCG. I would imagine for very similar reasons. Our next card is Smoke Grenade of the Thief. Now that's a card that doesn't really see very much play, if I'm being honest. It doesn't really see play at all. It's very gimmicky in Noble Knight and Infernoble Knight decks. It sees play in Virtual Worlds with the Power Tool Dragon engine, but it's not really that good of a card. I think they're just banning this to keep it in line with the TCG. Maybe there's some new decks or new things coming out sometime soon that might have some serious shenanigans to work alongside this. I don't know. I'm avoiding leaks because of recent controversy around them. But the Smoke Grenade of the Thief, I'm pretty sure this is just being banned to bring it in line with the TCG. And it's not a super fun card, right? It's not super great, so you know what? I can't be too upset about that. Although a card I can be a little bit upset that they're banning is Terraforming. I thought this was a really weird one. It is the second most used spell and the 6th most used card overall, limited to 1 both TCG, OCG, and until recently Master Duel, but as of the 8th of June, this card's no longer going to be playable. Now, this card, of course, does see quite a lot of usage in basically any deck that has a field spell, of course. Tier Element probably being number 1 amongst them, but it's also going to pretty heavily hurt Floenderies. Floenderies and Tier Elements both have their field spells limited to 1, so you're having the amount of copies of that card in the deck, which is a much bigger deal to them than it is to most. In terms of other decks using it, some GOTY players are using it. Plunder Patrol are going to hate the fact that they don't have Terraforming because their field spell is really solid, but again, their field spell's at 3, so they're not going to miss it too much. Ume Control is going to miss it a decent bit. Dark Magician, not being able to search for the Secret Village, I'm not too upset about. Secret Village is kind of toxic. Yeah, ultimately nothing else here that's ridiculously impactful, but it's mainly just Flu and Tier Elements. I think this is going to impact the most. Branded Despia is going to be seeing a bit of a resurgence once its new support comes out, but I don't know if the Theater is going to be amongst the cards that's going to make it very good. So Terraforming hit, mainly stopping these two decks, but a very weird one, especially given the context of something we're going to talk about in a minute. Next up, we've got cards that are going to be limited, and we've really hit the big 3 here. We've got Agido, Mudora, and Keldo all going to 1. Now that's big. Now that does bring these cards back in line with the OCG and TCG, and you know what? I think that's fairly deserved. I'm a little surprised they didn't bring Kelbeck in line as well. But Mudora and Keldo both going to 1 each. I feel like these two in particular were major banes of people's existences. There's a whole ton of decks that just became significantly more viable. Mudora and Keldo going to 1, fantastic. Agido going to 1 was a little unexpected. I felt like they were going to hit everything or nothing, and they sort of went halfway with the Agido Kelbecks. But again, Agido going to 1, I can't be upset about that either. It's a pretty toxic card given Tier Elements and their dominance, especially considering there's no Tier Elements being limited. No Tier Elements being banned, no Tier Elements being limited, so they're just shooting all of the engines around it, hitting the Terraforming, hitting the Keldo, hitting Mudora, hitting Agido. They're just trying to hit everything around the Tier Element cards to weaken it without actually hitting the Tier Element cards, which I think is a really good way of going about it, because Tier Element it's a really ridiculously powerful deck, but the way in which it plays is that of a positive influence on the game. I feel like Tearlaments is actually a relatively positive influence on Yu-Gi-Oh as a whole. I think the problem is that it's the only deck of its kind. I feel like Tearlaments, though, sets a really positive precedent, and we should be aiming to have more decks like Tearlament without having these broken mechanics and surrounding engines. I feel like that's really where the problem is coming in, as well as, of course, other decks not having the ability to compete. I don't think it's a case of ban the ever-living shit out of Tearlaments. I think it's a case of we have a good deck and a good idea here. We now need to take these same principles and implement them to build other decks of that same power level. So Tearlaments are largely unaffected, other than these, of course, peripheral hits. And now we've got cards that are going to 2. This is pretty interesting here, actually. We've got a couple. Number 1, we've got Sprite Blue. Let me bring Sprite Blue up here. Sprite Blue, of course, being a pretty solid hit. I think Sprite Blue to 2 is just the tap on the wrist that Sprite needed. I feel like Sprite's definitely very, very powerful, but they're not overly so. A little hit to Sprite Blue, I don't mind this at all. And for the last few cards on the list, we've got a bit of a lightning round here, basically, because not a ton of them have a lot of interaction with the meta. Nadir's Servant, again, I don't really know fully why this card is limited to 1. It's a decent card, don't get me wrong, but I mean, the fact that it locks you out of your extra deck, and Nadir's Servant, of course, Dogmatic is getting more support as far as I'm aware in the upcoming sets. I don't remember exactly what they're getting, so maybe Nadir's Servant is actually going to hold a place in the meta. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think it's just being brought up from 1, so it's more in line with the TCG and OCG, because it's really not that powerful. It's used in, what, Dogmatica shit all... basically just Dogmatica decks, of course, right? It's a Dogmatica card, but Dogmatica is not making a huge impact on the meta right now, so that, yeah, this card could probably come to 3, to be honest. Unless there's some sort of context that I'm missing, but this card could probably come to 3. We've got Girsu. Girsu is, again, Orcust aren't exactly making waves right now. They have been slowly accruing more support. They're, let's bring up an Orcust list here, for example. Harp Horror, now at 3. That card used to be limited to 1. It's currently banned in the TCG, but this card is at 3 here, which is awesome for these guys. Now they've got Girsu going to 2 as well. So yeah, this deck is pretty damn powerful. I feel like Orcust need every little bit of support they can get their hands on, and this is only going to be even more to help them out. So I can't be angry at this, absolutely. We've got Saber Angel Benton. Drytrons is dead. I don't know what to tell you. Drytrons isn't that good right now. Saber Angels, of course, aren't good right now. Most ritual decks aren't. This card's at 3 in the TCG and OCG. I don't know why this card is still limited. Again, you could bring this to 3 tomorrow, and I don't think anything is going to change in the meta. Maybe Drytron becomes a little bit more powerful, but okay. Alright. But that's fine. Saber Angel Benton to 3, and there's one card remaining, and this is the most interesting one in my opinion. This is the biggest hit on the list. Metaverse to 2. Now that's interesting. So they're basically taking Terraforming out and putting Metaverse in. Now Metaverse is at 3 in the TCG and OCG, so there's not a ton of reason as to why it shouldn't be at 3 in Master Duel either. The fact that it was limited to 1 was quite strange to me. But it being at 2 is very, very significant, and it's significant for one reason. So not only this card basically activates a spell card, a field spell, directly from the deck. Now the reason that's important is, unlike Terraforming, this card can be activated directly from the deck essentially by Trap Trick, which means that you went from 1 copy of Metaverse to 5 copies of Metaverse because of Trap Trick. So if you're playing a deck that really needs like a field spell to get running, Trap Trick is now going to give you extra copies of those field spells. For example, if you're looking to run Necro Valley in Crystal Beast, I think now will probably want to run Trap Trick to put Necro Valley on the board. So anything that relies upon its field spell, this is a huge and very interesting twist in how to make it work. Will it hold a place in Flu and Tearlament decks? That's a question yet to be answered. We don't know. With the Tearlament deck, I just don't think they want to spare the 5 spots that it would take to run these. I just don't think it's going to be worth it to them. Especially considering they don't play a ton of other normal trap cards. Their deck's too fast for it, and they really do kind of want their field spell for its turn 1 effect when you actually activate it. Very similar to Flu. Flu want to use their field spell frame 1. They don't want to wait on it. So I don't think it's going to be massive in those two decks, but it is definitely going to be huge in a whole range of other decks. Labyrinth, I think, might even start playing Metaverse to try and get out a Necro Valley, just as an additional floodgate. You might see Dynamorphia, of course, already using Trap Trick. They might start taking this card in as well, get their Rex Term up, and then they just activate Metaverse for a Necro Valley. I feel like this is definitely going to have a lot of implications, and I'm planning on playing around with this particular unlimit a lot. So, you know, watch out for some Necro Valley, I guess. All in all, the changes in total, we didn't have any other, like, big unbans, which is fine. I feel like, again, I like how Master Duel is doing it in terms of, like, slowly shifting things in and out, like, every month or so, every 2 months. That's totally fine by me. I feel like they're hitting the right cards. So in terms of cards they might have missed, there's nothing really that springs to mind that is banned for no reason. I can't think of anything, really. So no, I think they're doing a bang-up job. I'm going to be honest with you. Gershuni, Dear Servant, I feel like these are all cards that aren't really all that good. Metaverse being unbanned is very, very interesting. So I'm glad that these cards are unbanned because they're very important to their individual sort of archetypes and deck types, but they're not super impactful like across the board. Fantastic limits. I feel like the limiting of these 3 cards and Terraforming is going to be huge. Banning Cyberstein, huge. So we're going to definitely see a bit of a shift, and the overall power level of Tearlaments is going to plummet. It's still probably going to be better than everything else currently in the game, but if recent leaked information is to be believed, then between this and Bestials, Tearlaments might cease to exist. They're still going to be one of the top decks, don't get me wrong, but I feel like the entire meta is going to be built around Bestials and the ability to counter them, because Bestials have such a dominating matchup against Tearlaments. So Tearlament Bestial is probably going to be the next meta, but we'll see. Anyway, that's my thoughts, that's the review, there it is, that's what impact all the cards are going to have. If you get any questions, any suggestions, or anything that you think they should have changed that they didn't, throw it down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.